You might think fingerprints are just for unlocking your phone, but there's a much more chilling truth. Before you had a name, before you had a nationality, before you took your first breath, the tiny ridges on your fingertips had already begun to be written inside your mother's womb. And once they form, they stay with you for pretty much your entire life. That's why, for over a century, investigators have used fingerprints to track people down. But here's the scarier question. If fingerprints are so stable, are they only used to identify you? Or are they also holding a faint echo of those who came before you? The world of fingerprints doesn't start with millions of different types. It begins with three major families: arches, loops, and whorls. Three shapes, three paths. Three types of biological maps that humanity carries on its hands. 1. The map written in darkness. The first thing you have to understand is that fingerprints aren't something that appears randomly after you're born. They begin to develop around the 3rd month of pregnancy and are fully formed by about the 6th month. The general shape of the ridges is influenced by genetics, but the tiny details are also molded by the environment in the womb. That's why even identical twins, who share the same DNA, don't have identical fingerprints. In other words, a fingerprint is where genes and circumstances meet for the first time. It's familial enough to carry a genetic echo, but it's also private enough to make you an unrepeatable individual. That's why they're so haunting. They're not entirely destiny, but they're not entirely random either. 2. The arch mark of the trailblazer. The arch is the most minimalist type of fingerprint. The ridges enter from one side, rise in the middle like a low wave, and then exit on the other side. This pattern has two basic variations, the plain arch and the tinted arch, where the tinted type rises higher and steeper, almost with a flick upwards in the center. Because they look straightforward, neat, and have no closed mazes, arches have long been associated with directness, people who are practical, not long-winded, quick to react, and dislike complex mind games. But let's pause here for a second. That's great symbolic language for a video. It's not a scientific verdict on personality. The more interesting part lies elsewhere. In anthropology and forensics, characteristics like basic pattern type, ridge density, and other morphological indices of fingerprints have been used to study differences between population groups. That means an arch might be a very small part of your ancestral picture, but it's not a biological passport. A finger with an arch can't tell you which mountain range you're from, what ethnicity you are, or if you have warrior blood. It's an archaeological shard, not the entire lost city. 3. The loop, mark of the one who returns. If the arch is a straight path through the world, then the loop is the path that goes out and comes back. According to forensic classification, a loop is a pattern where one or more ridges enter from one side of the finger, curve around, touch or cross an imaginary line between the delta and the core, and exit on the same side they entered. It always has at least one delta. This is the type that surprises many people because, in some population surveys, it's the most common pattern. In a study of 2 population groups in North India, the loop was the most frequently encountered type, followed by the whorl, composite, and then the arch. If there's one pattern that evokes the face of the human majority, the loop is often a prime candidate. And that's why it's easily portrayed as the mark of adaptability. Go out and come back. Experiment and adjust. Adventurous, but never completely cutting ties with the starting point. You can use this imagery to write compellingly. People with many loops aren't necessarily descendants of an adaptable race, but the loop offers a powerful metaphor for humanity's flexible rhythm of life. It's the fingerprint of the scenic route, of bending so you don't break, of surviving through adaptation rather than direct confrontation. But remember what forensics always remembers. A loop alone doesn't say who you are. It's just the first layer. True identity lies in the much smaller details. 4. The whorl, maze of the one who holds the center. Then we come to the fingerprint type that fascinates people the most, the whorl. According to standard classification, a whorl usually has at least 2 deltas and some ridges that form a complete or near-complete circle. Within the whorl family, there are many sub-patterns like the plain whorl, central pocket loop, double loop, and even the accidental whorl, structures that look like a tiny biological maze coiling in on itself. It's not hard to see why the whorl is always associated with concepts like introversion, center of gravity, strong ego, or a multi-layered mind. Just by looking at it, you get the feeling it's hiding something, and it's this self-contained appearance that countless pop psychology systems latch onto. But the most interesting scientific aspect lies elsewhere. Researchers use indices like ridge density and pattern intensity to compare population groups, sexes, and variations between populations. That makes the whorl a useful signal in population studies or initial forensic screening. But a beautiful whorl on your thumb can't, by itself, reveal your ancestral homeland. It shows a pattern. It doesn't confess an identity. 5. Does family show up on your fingertips? This is where things get really interesting. If fingerprints are influenced by genes, are siblings' prints more similar than strangers? The answer is yes, to a certain extent. A 2025 study comparing the thumbprints of sibling pairs and unrelated individuals found that sibling pairs had a significantly higher degree of pattern similarity on the right thumb. The study reported a 69.44% similarity in siblings versus 30.56% in unrelated individuals. But even so, Medline Plus emphasizes that the fine details of fingerprints are affected by the developmental environment in the womb, so even identical twins have different prints. That's the most beautiful paradox of fingerprints. Family leaves an echo, but no one can be copied. You might carry the shadow of your lineage on your hand, but that hand is still your own. 6. So, do fingerprints really reveal ancestry? This is the part the internet often exaggerates. The honest answer is, at a population level, there can be a signal. At the level of a specific individual, not in the mystical way many people imagine. Anthropological and forensic studies have used dermatoglyphics to survey variations between population groups, sex differences, ridge density, and certain markers related to population structure. One study on 2 North Indian population groups even directly asked whether Rajput or Brahmin ancestry could be identified through digital fingerprints, concluding that these features seem useful for identification at an ancestral/group level, but not for individual identification. To put it simply, a fingerprint might whisper about a population trend. It can't point directly to your great-grandfather's ancient village. It's more like the statistical noise of history than a confession of bloodline. And because it doesn't tell the whole story, it's all the more captivating. It doesn't give you the final answer. It gives you the feeling that there's a slightly ajar door on your own body. 7. Why do police trust fingerprints but not use them to read fate? Because forensics only trusts what can be compared, tested, and cross-referenced. NIST describes modern fingerprint analysis as taking a print from a crime scene, a latent print, and comparing it to a print from a known person, then evaluating the degree of similarity through ridge patterns, endings, and bifurcations. In other words, an investigator doesn't look at a whorl and say, "This person is mysterious." They look at every tiny detail. The history of that is also chilling. In 1892, in the case of Francisco Rojas in Argentina, investigators found a bloody fingerprint at the scene, compared it to the suspect, and it was recorded as the first time a fingerprint was successfully used to solve a murder. From then on, fingerprint stepped out of the realm of mystery and straight into the criminal records, passports, ID cards, and borders of the modern world. This is something you can use powerfully in a video. Fingerprints have 2 lives. One life in the human imagination, where they become symbols of personality and ancestry, and another life in the lab, where they are cold, hard, and very difficult to refute. 8. The most dangerous promise: reading intelligence and personality from fingerprints. Now we touch on the darkest area of this topic, because once people believe the body is talking, someone will always be there to sell them a translation. In recent years, systems like DMIT have promoted the idea that by simply scanning your fingerprints, you can discover your learning style, innate talents, thinking patterns, and even career path. It sounds very appealing, almost irresistible. But a 2025 critique of DMIT describes the problem precisely. The method is attractive because it's non-invasive and easy to use, but rigorous empirical evidence is lacking. Peer-reviewed studies are sparse, standardization, reliability, and predictive value remain questionable, and the risk of overinterpretation is real. This is a line you should draw very sharply. Fingerprints can hold traces of the process of your formation in the womb. Fingerprints can carry a faint echo of family and population variations. Fingerprints are extremely powerful in forensic identification. But to leap from that to concluding that they determine whether you're an introvert or extrovert, born to be a leader or an artist, the data is currently not solid enough to state that as truth. And honestly, that doesn't make fingerprints any less magical. It makes them even more frightening. Because the real secret of fingerprints isn't that they tell everything about you, it's that they tell just enough to make you unable to stop looking down at your own hands. 9. The final secret on your fingertips. So, what are fingerprints after all? Not just a passcode, not just crime scene evidence, not just a beautiful pattern. They are your first signature in this world, guided by genes, refined by the womb, similar enough to your family to suggest ancestry, different enough to prove that no one has ever been you, and no one will ever be you again. Now, look down at your own two hands. Do you see arches, loops, or whorls? And what gives you more of a chill? The thought that your ancestors might have left a small echo on your fingertips? Or the thought that among billions of people, your body still silently holds a map that no one can copy? Post the fingerprint type you see most often in the comments. And let me know, do you want me to do a part 2 on the rarest and most unusual fingerprint types? Or how police actually read a fingerprint at a crime scene? See you in the next video.